Amy, I was wondering if we could put up that question now about seeing how many people in attendance have ever worked with a UX writer in the past or who are currently working with UX writers, just to give me a lay of the land. I'm actually going to go ahead and answer myself. So what we're here to talk today about is UX writing, and I don't know how to see the results of the poll, but I'm just going to dive right in, and maybe Chris or Amy, you can just update me.
See, so we had about 100 people voting. That's most of everybody here.
Okay, great. Good for me to know.
So are you able to see the results?
Yeah, it popped back up again for me. Thanks.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm here today to talk mostly about UX writing, what it is, how it's different from copywriting, because that's kind of how this whole thing came to me in the first place. I am pretty new to UX in general. This will be my second year with the Kroger company as of about April. Before that, I had no experience in UX. So pretty new to the space. And I found that, especially when I first started, but it even happens every day now at my job, people would refer to me as a copywriter, which I really thought nothing about because I thought, well, I'm just here to do the work. What does it matter what people call me? Down the road, came to find out it actually does matter because I'm not doing a service to anyone by continuing that, by not correcting people, because I'm failing to educate my peers about how these two crafts are different and about how we can all collaborate to make the best experiences for our users. So that's like the gist of what we're going to cover today. But for those of you who aren't UX writers, know that a lot of you are probably actually doing UX writing currently. So there's some tips for you, but also for people doing more copywriting, typewriting that we can all align on. So jumping, let me see if it'll, there we go. Just like a really brief overview of how I got here, because UX writers kind of come from all walks of life, really. But like several of you that I saw in the chat, I started in academia, English literature first, then art history. I was kind of like an art critic working for some local magazines, then segued into writing a book about Cincinnati's brewing history. And at that same time, I was also working for a company that creates school safety content for school staff. So I started off like as an account manager there, then moved into an editorial role. Took some time off to stay home with my kids. And when I came back to the workforce again, it was at a company called Patient Point, where I was writing patient education. That led me to my current role, where you see the fireworks exploding, which is Kroger. For those of you outside of the United States, Kroger is one of the biggest, depending upon the metric that you're using, grocery chain in America. Moving a lot into e-commerce these days, which is really exciting. We're actually in the top 10 e-commerce providers in America as of this year. So that's where I'm at and how I got here. Now let's dive in to talk about what UX writing is, also what is not. The first definition I like is this one from the Nielsen-Norman Group, which is the practice of writing carefully considered copy that takes into account the user's context, needs, and behaviors. I provided that bolding myself because I think those are really important points. The first one is that every word must count. So every word is carefully considered, which is kind of torturous for a person like me who overthinks everything that comes out of my mouth anyway. I don't know if this is a healthy environment for me or not, but I am enjoying myself personally. So the other big important point about this is that it is all about the user. This is our main focus of UX writing. Everything stems from this. It's all about the user, their context, needs, and behaviors. Another definition that I really like is from Scott Kuby. I hope that's how I pronounce, or how you pronounce his last name. I'm not totally sure, but he's the author of Writing for Designers. He is a great person to follow on LinkedIn. I believe he's on Twitter as well. I follow him on LinkedIn, but really insightful, kind of like a field leader. So he defines it as less writing but apps, more design but words. I love this because it automatically embeds the UX writer in the designer role, because this is something that I feel, just from talking to a lot of UX writers out there, is pretty common to be left out of the initial steps of the design process, which is it's such a critical time to include the writer if you're going for like a content first strategy to your digital experiences. The UX writers have to be included up front. So they are like part of this design team. It's a very, very collaborative process. UX writers should not be working in isolation. They should be working as part of a team. And again, from the initial phases, seeing this all the way through to the end. It's kind of difficult for me personally to be doing this fully, because I am currently the first and only UX writer for the Kroger company, which is a really, really massive company. So, I face a lot of challenges, but obviously doing my best. And I just realized I'm not even in presentation mode. I'm so sorry, guys. Anyway, there's a lot of unique challenges for me specifically, but I do try to get embedded early and often, as frequently as I can. Just speaking personally, it is a really great opportunity for me, being a very social person. I get to meet everybody. I get to work with all the teams. You kind of have oversight into everything that's going on in all these different spaces. So you can connect the dots when you meet with all these different teams separately. You can kind of bring them all together. So visually, this is kind of representing how this collaborative process works with UX writing. What we're seeing on the left is the initial screen that I was provided to show our customers who are at we call them internally banners. It's really just one of our family of stores. So Owens was this family of stores that was turning into a Kroger, so being rebranded as a Kroger. And we were sunsetting the Owens app. So the Owens app was going away. We had to encourage users to download the Kroger app now. This is historically a pain point for people. They don't want to put another app on their phone. So there was no way we could present them with this very sad, dark screen. Mine's in dark because my phone's in dark mode, but it was otherwise just a white background. Not super enticing. And in addition to the fact that the copy was off, that's why it was handed to me, just to update this. But my first ask was to be partnered with a designer so the two of us could work together to make a more pleasant experience for the user. The screen on the right is what we landed on. However, this is not a high res final for this image at all. This was just, kind of for placement only. I don't have the final version, but it just gives you an idea of how we got from step A to step B. So the designer and I collaborated on everything that you see here, the hierarchy, the visuals, and we landed on this final product, which we hope is a little more friendly, a little more welcoming, a little more aligned with our brand, to encourage users to continue shopping with us, just using a new app. So this is where we get into the differences between copywriting and UX writing. So first thing to point out, copywriting is going to aim to engage the user by marketing or selling a product or service. UX writing, on the other hand, is aiming to guide the user through a digital experience. So you can look at that as the difference between enticing someone to begin versus empowering them and enabling them to proceed and continue throughout the experience. So another way I kind of look at it is the difference between creating emotion within a user or responding to the emotions of the user. Now I put those two lines at the end that you see. It's not us versus them, it's us and them together, because I was noticing when I correct people and say, oh, actually, I'm not a copywriter, I'm a UX writer, people would apologize and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to refer to you as a copywriter. And I'm by no means attempting to elevate one or the other. We are very much equal. We very much need each other to be successful. So I just really wanted to point that out. Like, there is no elevation, one or the other. We are equally important, and we really need to work together to provide the best experiences. UX writing in the wild. This is what it looks like out there. This is the first screen, part one. And it just kind of goes without saying for me that just about, well, everything that I'm showing you here is all going to be Kroger centric, because this is my personal experience that I'm sharing with you all today. So the screen that you see on the left here, this is our app. You'll notice that almost the entire screen is all representative of UX writing. The search bar, these little blocks of content here that we call quick links internally. This section, the hero banner with the yellow background, the cans of food, that is actually copywriting. So that's more of that marketing driven content. Everything else that you see on this page is UX copy. And that is for a reason, because apps are designed for repeat users who are very mission driven. They have a goal to accomplish. They want to pull up in the app, accomplish that goal, be on their way. That's why on the app, you're going to see so much UX writing content. Now, the screen that you see on the right is actually from our website. This is the web version, but this is a very specific area of goal-driven. It's a very goal-driven part of the experience, because at this point, the user is deciding how they want to shop and where they want to get their groceries from. So again, it's part of that mission that they're trying to accomplish. So that would be like a big UX writing heavy part of the web experience. Now on the next slide, we're going to see UX writing in the wild part 2, which is the website. I just had to put this side by side, but what you're seeing is above the fold on the left and below the fold on the right. Really all we're looking at in terms of UX writing on this screen is the start your cart area here, where the user is toggling between these 3 different options to start building a cart to check out. Everything else is more discovery, exploration, kind of offering curated content for the user to browse and explore. So all the rest of this would be copywriting examples. And again, this is very purposeful as well, because websites are designed to attract new users. So it gets more unique visitors than an app does. Therefore, we are trying to engage and attract users on the website, more copywriting content. The ironic part about UX writing, I find, is that really sometimes it's not about what to say, but whether it needs to be said at all. And this, again, is grounded in the fact that UX writing is all about the user. So the first thing you're going to ask when you're looking at a piece of content is this in the user's best interest? Do they need this at this point in their journey? Is it useful? Is it helpful? If it's not, what's our motivation? Is this really in the best interest of the user, or is it not? So sometimes your move is not to tweak copy, it's not to add copy, it's to omit. Now we're going to get into voice and tone a little bit. Just for those of you who may not be as familiar with what voice and tone is, this is a basic breakdown of how it works. So voice is the brand or product's personality. Tone is how the voice shifts in response to the user. So you could look at it like, my voice is recognizable for what it is. You could hear me in a room and you could know that, oh, that's Sarah speaking. Now, if I'm, say, talking to my children and they did not clean their room, that tone might be modified slightly, as opposed to, oh, let's say one of my kids brought home a great report card. Very different tones. same voice. That's the just really basic idea behind voice and tone. So again, voice is consistent regardless of medium. So how the viewer is using it, how the viewer is like taking in the content. Regardless of copy length, this could be like a 2-word button. The voice is still consistent, regardless of placement, etc. Tone, on the other hand, varies depending upon the situation. And this is in reference to like the user's current situation and their possible emotion, how they're feeling at this point. Now, I find this really interesting. I got this from the source at the bottom, which is the amazing book, Writing is Designing, by Michael Metz. I always forget his first name, Michael Metz and Andy Welfley. And again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing Andy's last name correctly. I'm very sorry, Andy. It's a great book. I would highly, highly recommend it. They break this down in a way that's like so clear to me. So brand voice, what you see on the left, is representative of copywriting. It serves to engage the audience or motivate them to become customers. And it includes every touch point or every like experience that you would have with a brand. It could be a TV commercial, it could be radio, billboards, in-store signage. For those of you like in the US, if you live by a Kroger store, you know, like Fry's, Fred Meyer's, Baker's, anything, you may have seen the Low commercial with the Krogi. Those are like our animated characters. It'll be seared in your brain for forever once you hear it. It's a very catchy song. That will be representative of the brand voice. Product voice, on the other hand, is much more targeted. It needs to fit within and carry the brand voice with narrower goals and stricter constraints. Now, all this is to say, it does depend kind of on the size of your company, because if you're a huge enterprise like Kroger is, your brand voice and your product voice are probably going to be distinct. They're going to be separate. Obviously, they're going to have overlap and they're going to align in certain ways, but they will be different in how you approach them. If you are working for a small company, there really may not be that much difference at all. For my personal experience, there is a difference between brand voice and product voice. We'll get into that in the following slides. Another thing to point out about product voice, what we're talking about here is your digital products, your website, app, or other digital products. Next, we have what the brand voice looks like on the Kroger website. I mentioned before a commercial that many of you probably haven't seen if a lot of you are out of the country. But this is what that brand voice looks like on our website. You're going to notice that we have like the 2-word combination of home gating. We have truncated combination to be combos on that second piece of content. We have a little metaphor, sports metaphor, beverages for all the players. This is our game day page where you're going to find like a lot of tailgating recipes and those types of foods. So the brand voice at Kroger, I forgot to mention this on the previous slide, excuse me. Kroger's brand voice, if you were to look in our brand book, is comprised of probably like 10 to 15 different attributes. Approachable, friendly, witty, fun, all kinds of things that can be inclusive of everything that you see here. However, the product voice, because our user base is so expansive. I mean, this is literally the users that we're talking is absolutely anyone in the United States of America. I believe just the continental United States. I don't know if we've gone beyond that. Last I heard continental, but I could be wrong there. Excuse me, Alaska and Hawaii, if I'm wrong. But because our user base is so broad, this is anyone who shops for groceries, which is everyone has to eat. We have to speak not to a targeted audience, but to the whole United States of America. Because our user base is so broad, our product voice needs to be very targeted, very streamlined to make it a very simple experience that anyone can use and access. So that said, you'll notice that the brand is pretty playful, very fun. This would be the closest one-to-one correlation that I can think of currently in our product voice. And what you're looking at here are two different screens that would prompt you to upgrade your app version. So you still have that playful language, it interplays with the imagery. Note to point out here is you have to make sense or have to make sure that your alt text, so the copy that you use to tag this image, is really sharp so that it makes sense to non-sighted viewers or to viewers who are using a screen reader. So this is just about as playful and like whimsical as you'll see with our language, because it's at a point where we want to give the user, again, a reason to upgrade their app, a reason to continue shopping with us. It's trying to be like a really uplifting moment for them. So that's why we go a bit bolder in this moment. Next, I wanted to share with all the 100 and whatever the count was of you in this room, well, this virtual space that we're in, an example that I don't so much care for that I did right and wish that I could take back, but we all have to make mistakes to learn from them. So the reason that I consider this a mistake is for several reasons. First of all, it's language that is appearing at a moment. This is an error message, basically. Something has gone wrong, but the language that we're providing to the user to explain the error doesn't really tell them what happened. And it could backfire if the error isn't resolved by refreshing the page. So what my intent here was to add some levity to a moment that could be frustrating. However, what I didn't think of at the time that I wrote this, and this was very shortly after I got into UX writing. So what I wasn't really thinking through at the time was how this can actually have the reverse effect and really start to annoy somebody if they keep refreshing this page and keep seeing a message that something went bananas. That is not providing the best experience for the user. But on top of that, it's also inaccessible. I'd be curious for our users out of the country to learn if you know of the expression to go bananas, or when we say something went bananas, if you know what that means, because that's the risk that we're taking here as well, is that does this translate for non-native English speakers? My hunch is probably not. That's why I consider this not ideal copy. But in addition, a lot of the copy that you see here is repetitive and unnecessary. And that came from another pain point that I experience sometimes is you have to kind of play a telephone game when you're the only UX writer. You hand off the copy and it can go through anywhere from like 4 to 6 more people after you hand it off. So in this specific situation, there was like a miscommunication of what was supposed to be implemented. But it ended up with copy that's just repetitive, doesn't really need to be there, and doesn't really say anything of extreme value for the user. So again, the overall intent here was to be, you know, a little bit witty, just give some levity to this moment, but I personally don't think it was very successful. So this is not live on our site right now. This is just something, honestly, that I tweaked just before this talk this evening so that I could modify it with everything that I know in the past or everything that I have learned leading up to now to give the user a better experience. It's not 100% still, but at least it has a little bit more instruction in the header, which is one of the only pieces of content that the user will read in general. We'll get into that more a bit down the road, but at least the header is a little bit more direct. There's no idioms in play here. We're telling the user they're having trouble connecting and they can refresh the page. You know, at least if the error were to happen again and they have to keep refreshing, hopefully by removing that like silly, cheeky language, it at least wouldn't damage us in any way further than, you know, the annoyance of having to deal with an error. So moving on to the next example, this is one that I feel we really got just right for the user. A nice example of working the tone in a way that they would appreciate. So what you're seeing here is our savings center. We have at Kroger many different ways for the users to save money. We have coupons. We have a weekly ad that they can browse through. It's actually like a printed ad that is mailed to them, or on the website, it's just the items that they see in the weekly ad and they can add it to their shopping list. We also have a new form of savings called cashback, where you get a portion of the money that you spend on qualifying items is returned to you. Excuse me. So what I really like about this, and we're talking to be specific about this piece of content at the beginning, where it says you've saved $1,577.65 this year. Why I like this and why I think it creates a really nice tone is because you're providing the user with an uplift based on the content that they want to see. Our users really, really care about how much money they're saving, and they really like to track it. So we figured by giving this information to them first, let's just focus in on those savings. This is what they're here to see. Hopefully they can feel like a real sense of accomplishment and appreciation for watching their savings grow. But in addition to giving the overview at the top, we also are providing them with even more savings options if they want the information just below that, just next on the screen. So we're hoping that this creates a really friendly, uplifting, empowering moment for the user. Now, this one is a bit of an experiment, and like, to be honest with everyone here, I have no idea how this has gone over with users because I haven't seen any. I don't even know if we really have any research on this, but it's an area where we decided to try some humor. What we're looking at here is a screen from Kroger Pay. Kroger Pay is a lot like Apple Pay. You add your credit card information to the app and you scan to pay through a token experience, except the only difference is when you scan, it's actually running your Plus card. For those of you not familiar with Kroger, your Plus card is like your loyalty account. It's the number that would attach you to savings, for example. Like, that's how we track your savings and provide all that information to you. So Kroger Pay scans your payment and your Plus card, your loyalty information, all at the same time. So this particular screen is part of an onboarding flow, but it also lives eternally in like a little help icon on the Kroger Pay scanning screen. So it's optional. I think it's pretty standard to say that a lot of times users go through onboarding pretty quickly. So the odds are high that they could miss it. However, if they do stay to read through, our hope is that they will see this as humorous, fun, and will impart that uplifting product voice, excuse me, I almost said brand voice. So what we have here are instructions for how to use Kroger Pay. Why this was really well received internally is because the instruction is very clear. We are like showing the user through those illustrations how to scan your phone to use Kroger Pay. Generally, we went a little bit beyond where we would normally with product voice, because Kroger Pay users are in general like a more tech savvy user base, more likely to be native English speakers. Also, this particular screen is it's not like a journey stopping moment. So we felt that it was a good time to just experiment with this and see how it goes. But I'd be curious to see if anyone has feedback on it, because again, I haven't seen anything concrete from our user base. But again, internally, it was well reviewed because of the voice and tone that it imparted. So now we're going to get to the portion of the talk. I'm going to check my time real quick, where we're going to discuss how to write user-focused copy that is relevant really to anyone creating digital content. These are the 3 points that we're going to generally talk about. why it's important to ask questions first, then write later. Second, you have to understand what and how users read. And third, you have to remember accessibility and inclusivity. So let's jump in with this asking questions. This list of questions that you'll see on this screen is a very basic list of just the first things that came to my head of common questions that I'm going to ask when I'm presented with a copy request, a UX copy request. So the ones that I bolded are the ones that I think would have overlap with copywriting. All of them may not be relevant, but I do think it would always be relevant for someone who is working on, more marketing, copywriting type content to say, what happens next after the user interacts with this? Is there a similar design or similar verbiage elsewhere in the experience? And what kind of testing are we planning to launch after this? How do we know if it's successful or not? So those other three questions are just some basic things that I would always ask before I almost said put pen to paper, but I'm not going to be doing that before I put my fingers on the keyboard and start typing. So does it answer a user need? How did the user get to this place? Where are they going next? Have we tested it already? When did we test it? What did those results show? But again, asking questions helps to get you back in the mind frame of the user, break you out of your own mind frame and being like too close to the product itself. It helps you take a step back and reflect. Using plain language is super, super important. What that is words and language users understand the first time they read or hear it. And I gave some instruction on how to write in plain language over on the other side of the screen here. Use common familiar words and phrases. Don't use jargon, idioms, or expressions. Jargon is a real big challenge because when you are so close to a product, it doesn't sound like jargon to you anymore. You know it, you're familiar with it, you understand it. But again, you always have to check yourself, always cross-check with people who aren't on your team. You could ask your parents, you could ask your grandparents, you could ask anyone outside of your team, really. Like, do you understand this word? But checking with others is a really good way to make sure that you are not using language that people won't understand. Active voice is a big part of plain language. So I gave an example of enter your password here versus your password is entered here. I will say the one exception where I think passive voice is okay is in certain error messages, because then it removes the brand as the actor. So it's the difference between saying, if your credit card is declined, for example, it's the difference between saying, we declined your card, or your card was declined. So the second version is still accurate, but it's just a bit softer. And that's, again, an exception to where I think it's appropriate to use passive voice. Another thing that I do a lot, which is really nice for work from home, is read your copy out loud, because it is such a quick way to check if you sound like a robot or a human. We always want to sound like a human, not like a robot. No offense to you robots out there. But it's just such a natural way to make sure that it sounds like a conversation, because at the end of the day, UX writing is really a conversation between the interface and the user. And we just want to facilitate that and keep it going. So the last point about plain language here, be brief, be clear, but if you have to sacrifice one, sacrifice brevity. Always, always, always be clear. To piggyback off that prior screen, this is the why of why it's important to use plain language. Of US citizens, 40% have low or very low literacy. Now, that statistic was accurate as of about October of 2019, but it's pretty jarring for me personally to see that. That is a very, very high amount. Now, contrast that against the percentage of people who own a smartphone, 81%, and about 75% own a computer. What does that mean? We're going to have overlap between the people who are using your digital product and those who have low literacy. It is crucial to keep it simple for that reason. But I want to make sure that people understand that plain language does not make your product unsophisticated. It just makes it easy to use, which is great for everyone. This is the content that users are most likely to read: headers, buttons, links, also bulleted words or bullets, a bulleted list, bolded words, that kind of stuff. Often it's the only content users will read. And another really interesting statistic is that users are generally going to read about 20% of the content on any given page. And it's not because people don't want to read or they're lazy. It's because they are skimming to conserve their energy. It's something I wanted to address because I hear from time to time, if we're working on a design, there's a lot of copy, people tend to just shrug it off and say, oh, well, no one reads, and kind of give it an eye roll and, you know, a little bit put the blame on the user. And really, we should never be doing that. It is not the user's fault. Like, the competition between what any given user is faced with multitasking wise is fierce. We have seconds on an app. We have, I believe it's maybe like up to a minute on any given page of a website before they switch tabs or just shut down the computer altogether, put their device down. So this is not about people not reading. It's about people being overburdened with information, and it's on us to lower the cognitive load and make it as easy as possible to understand. I feel like I just had one more thing to say about that and then it left my mind. So maybe it'll come back 2 days from now. I'll keep you guys posted. Another really important point for anyone writing digital copy is to write for accessibility. Plain language is part of that. There are also some other tips on how to do this. Writing for accessibility and inclusivity, which there's a lot of overlap there. It's something that personally I'm new to. I'm just trying to educate myself more about this currently so I can get really sharp on it, because Kroger's central brand tenet is fresh for everyone. So I want to make sure that that comes across crystal clear in every piece of UX copy that we have throughout the whole entire experience. Because what accessibility is writing to make sure all users have the same great experience. What that means is stop saying learn more and click here and other generic terms for links. Links, buttons should be unique and descriptive so that they set the appropriate expectations, but also because sometimes they can get lost on the page with a screen reader. If there's a bunch of click here, learn more, there could be a disconnect when someone's using a screen reader between like the learn more where they think they're at and the learn more that they're directed to. Plain language, I mentioned before, is really important. Also important to use device-agnostic language like choose or select, not click or tap. You should always pair color and icons with words. Color should never be the sole signifier in the experience. And that's not just for color blindness, but it's also because color can mean different things in different cultures. So it's just something to be mindful of. Icons, they may or may not be easily understood without the words to accompany it. So those should always be paired with a word. And then don't use directional language like above or below, at the top, at the bottom, to the left, to the right. We should try to avoid that. Writing for inclusivity is using words to empower instead of limit. Where I found that is the Conscious Style Guide, which again is something that I have only skimmed the surface of, but these are just a few things to be cognizant of as you're writing, excuse me. You should be mindful of things like race, ethnicity, gender, ability, disability, socioeconomic status, mental health, but there's even more things to be aware of than that. One thing that you can do right off the bat is start using they or their instead of he, she, his, her. The singular they, their seems to be pretty widely accepted now. So that's just a really quick thing that you can implement immediately. And then just be mindful around the holidays of how you are celebrating them, how you're referring to them, saying things like, and this is probably goes without saying at this point, but it's things like happy holidays instead of Merry Christmas. Or if you're saying Merry Christmas, use a variety of greetings as well, Happy Hanukkah, etc., for all those holidays that appear or that happen around the same time of year. Just some general tips, write with a mobile first mindset, and that's for web responsive sites, so that since more and more people are using their phones now, it's just a good idea to default to that, but it also helps you keep your copy really tight, really clear, really concise. Front-loading content is really important. This means putting the important information first, not burying it at the end. Be really careful of branded labels. And the specific example that I saw was titles in a menu, because when you're trying to make a branded moment in something like a menu, depending on the words you're using, they might not make sense to users. So just something to be aware of there. And this is just a general, it really depends on what you're working on, like how much content you have on a particular page and what you're trying to communicate. But what I'm finding, like for me personally, in the type of work that we do, is 3 lines or less. Like 3 should be your max. Ideally 2 lines of body copy is ideal. So just some final takeaways here. Wanted to, again, reinforce how UX writing is a highly collaborative process. So UX writers, whoever's doing the UX writing, regardless of whether it's a UX writer or a designer or whoever, this should be done in tandem with others on a team. So designer, UX researcher would be great, your developers, your PMs. It is a really collaborative process. The core difference between copywriting and UX writing, again, copywriting is trying to engage the user to begin a journey. UX writing is trying to facilitate and help the user to complete their journey. Brand voice and product voice will have overlap, but product voice is more targeted, more precise. And then just wanted to, again, reinforce those basic guidelines that are relevant to pretty much all digital content creators. Just some really handy things to keep in mind. And I think that was it. I think I went faster than I thought that I would. So that's my email address. I think I said in the beginning that I am really grateful to be here, because this gives me a really nice opportunity to meet people and to get feedback. Since I'm the only person doing what I do at my company, I really love to connect with people and hear what you're doing. And, you know, if you have feedback on anything here, I would love to hear it. So please feel free to email me. I forgot to put my LinkedIn page on here, but if you just look up Sarah Stevens at Kroger, I'm probably the only one, product designer. I think that's about it from me. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was awesome. And it looks like we've already got quite a few questions out there. Please feel free, everybody, to speak up if you've got a question or keep posting. But one that I see that keeps recurring is a question about, like, how do you get around the directional language, like the below and, you know, click here and all of those types of terms. What are some strategies for overcoming that type of language?
To write from top to bottom, left to right. So instead of, you know, I was actually just looking, this is the book that I was mentioning before. And I was looking at this the other day and tagged this exact, because I was working on a flow where I wanted to say above or below, and I had to like check myself and open up this book. And I'm just going to see if I can find it in here really quickly, because they said it so clearly and so nicely. The one thing that they pointed out was that I don't think I mentioned in here is, like, if you're working on a flow and somebody needs to know hints of how to create the right password, it's important to put that before the input field, not below, because they won't know what they're doing wrong. The screen reader won't have advanced to that point yet, so you should provide that before that input field. But oh, let me see if I can try and find it. It was more using stuff like saying, I can't find it right now, but it was saying things like, instead of go to the top, go to the beginning, because if you're writing top down, left to right, the beginning will send you back up to the top of the page. And instead of saying like, below find this, it will say next, select, continue, or whatever you're trying to do there. I hope that helps. I don't know if that was super clear.
I can see how that would be really helpful with just the responsive nature of web pages too, because right or left could be below or above depending on what device you're on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah, hi, I have a question for you. As you mentioned in your presentation, my question is, why did you decided to start it in this field as your word was, this is, I'm a brand new in this field. So why did you decide to change careers? I don't know what do you used to do before you get into this field?
Yeah, I was really fortunate because I was brought into this field by one of my very good friends. We worked together at Patient Point, which is a company that creates patient education materials, which honestly, I really, really loved because all my family is in healthcare. So I'm used to like listening to healthcare talk at the dinner table, and I was never able to contribute. And then when I started writing patient education, I was like, hey guys, I know what you're talking about. I can talk now. More than that though, I found that to be like a really inspiring field because I really felt like I was providing a service to people and helping them to understand really complicated information. I wasn't planning on leaving, but a friend of mine was hired at Kroger and she kept telling me, we need a writer, you would be perfect for this. And so eventually when they opened up the job, she suggested that I apply. And the more that I researched UX writing, I felt like I could easily segue into that because I was interested in it because it still involves a lot of research. It involves facilitating communication, which I love. I'm just like a very social person, like I said before. And I do view this as engaging with people. And especially at Kroger, providing a valuable service, and especially in a time of a pandemic, it's a frontline, brain farting on the word, mandatory, what do we call frontline workers? A mandatory service.
Essential, yeah.
So I do find, like, especially working for Kroger also is very gratifying because you're providing an essential service to people. Didn't plan on being here in a time of crisis, but it's very gratifying. And I love the collaboration. I love working with colleagues. I'm somebody who wants to be learning always. I never want to stop learning. And my colleagues have so much to offer. You know, this is just like, besides teaching me about UX, everyone is very different from different backgrounds. And I love that. It inspires me. And I just really like the collaboration at work and also getting to know people beyond that. It's just, people are very creative, intelligent, fun. It's a nice atmosphere. And I feel really lucky to have found this job also, like really, really fortunate. Oh, thanks everybody for saying essential. Hi, Alasha. And Emma, hi. Actually, Alasha is on this call now, and she was the designer who worked with me on 2 of those screens that I showed, the Saving Center screen and then the Owen sunsetting messages. And she is awesome, and I love Alasha.
God,
She's one of the very talented people I was just referring to.
Oh my gosh, I'm Team Sarah forever.
There also was a question in the chat of, can you provide some examples of how you would replace directional language? And there was a follow-up question, what's an example, what words we can use instead of learn more or see above or see below?
So that really depends on the content that you are writing, because it should be specific in setting the expectation of what is going to happen next. So instead of saying learn more, it would be, let me think of an example. Like, let's say on that tailgating site, it was a curated section of content that was going to have recipes for different dips. Instead of saying learn more, you could say view recipes, get recipes. It's just something along those lines. It should be specific to the situation, and it should help to set the right expectation of what is going to happen next, if that helps.
I think Karina might have a question. I think she had her camera on a few minutes ago.
Yeah, if it's possible, I was kind of wondering, how do you integrate, like if you're on a team and you have other stakeholders and you've got to kind of really make sure the copy that you're suggesting or like the wording that you're suggesting is going to resonate. Are there like tests you can run, or how do you know before you go live that out of all the options, that was the best one for the target audience that you had?
We do user research. So we have a research team at Kroger, and we partner with them to run tests, and language can be part of that, obviously. When I have done tests, like either it's usually like just me on my own collaborating with research, we tend to do, I think it's the surveys, because that way, I'm trying to think of how, with the program that we use, I think we do surveys because you can include a screenshot with the question, and they can also, so they can see it together and then provide their feedback. I think they write their feedback. But I think they can also, I think talk out loud is just when they're going through prototypes. But
yeah, so this is the thing, because if you're doing like A/B testing, like the classical way, what you're really measuring is your ability to complete a task. But if you're trying to, for example, see if the people resonate, or like, of course, if I tell you go to the end of the card and put that in, you're gonna get it, right? So when I'm just thinking like, is conjunct analysis better, or like how conceptually do you frame a test where we know you can get the job done, but does it really click with you, right?
Did you call it conjunct analysis?
Yeah, so like, when you have 2 copies that are identical and you only change one variable at a time, if you run enough of those, you can then do quantitative analysis and statistically say this particular variable is the difference maker, right? So technically, I'm thinking maybe you could use it for tone and try tone variations with the same content, or I'm trying to figure out like, how would people in the industry adapt classical tests that we have to this idea of tone? Because I feel it's very hard to kind of test tone by itself, right?
Well, you're testing emotion, really, and that's why it's difficult. So that's why we have done surveys in the past, because you can ask the users to get their feedback. I mean, it's something that I would love to do in person whenever we get to be in person again. because you can just ask and prompt certain questions like that when you're there. But go on. Oh yeah, Chris, you should talk to this. Duh.
No, I was just gonna add to it. Like in addition to testing emotion, we've also tested comprehension that way. So like the surveys that Sarah is mentioning, when we showed variations of the copy, then we will see like what has really resonated with the users. We have an unmoderated testing service that we'll use, and we can test those variations like you were saying, and then we can see like our people, like Sarah mentioned, people only reading 20% of the copy. So we go back and kind of see what did they really read, what did they come away with, and are we getting like which variation of the messaging, or are they really understanding like the primary message we're trying to get through. And yeah, I agree. It's important to like also follow up with A/B testing. So we work with our team that does that, and also see as we launch and go live, like which versions of the copy have the best responses. Yeah.
Hey, Kaylin, looks like you have a question.
Yeah, I was just curious, does search behavior or search intelligence ever come into play when you're choosing words to test or to use?
People are searching for?
Right. Yep. Just because nobody really lies to Google when they're typing in a query. That's usually the terms that they prefer. Do you ever consider that in your work?
I have tried to reach out about that in the past. So yes, it's something that has come up on my radar, but like as part of my daily work, I would say, not yet. I would love to get there eventually. But again, this is part of the struggle of only being one UX writer for a company as big as this is if I was embedded on that search team, then absolutely 100%, that would be part of the process. But because I'm just one person, it's really not feasible to cover all these areas.
Totally. Totally get that. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I'm trying to scroll through and see if there's anything. Oh, Elise is here. Hi, Elise.
We've got one towards the very end. Says any tips or methods during moderated interviews or unmoderated to come up with new names, for example, like a function that users don't currently understand.
Okay, wait. I'm scrolled down. I gotta read that again. Any tips?
Yeah, I don't know if the author of that question might want to elaborate a little bit.
So,
sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. Sorry about that. Yeah, so the question is sort of to ask if you have, let's say, a function within an app that just currently users aren't really understanding what it's supposed to do, and it's unique, like it's like a unique feature to the app. Do you have any tips for when you are going through and maybe you're testing your like a mock-up of a prototype, but like the process of actually generating that new name, and then like if you've just experienced anything or done any methods even to generate the concept like with users kind of organically to try to see what they're actually thinking that thing would be called. Not
so
sure.
have you done card sorting? Is that something that might be relevant?
I'm trying to give like an example that no, not really like a card sorting, more so like if you had like an actual function within the app, and it's that the current like marketing term, kind of going back to your point, it's like a marketing term that isn't coming across, but it's still, if you're trying to rename something, like what tips do you usually, or what methods do you usually use? I hope I'm being clear enough.
Yeah, I think you are. I just don't think I have done anything like that a lot. The only one that I can think of offhand is when Kroger started incorporating third-party sellers onto our website. So now it's like Amazon or like Walmart or something, where you won't just see Kroger products, but you'll see products from a third party that are being sold alongside products sold by Kroger. So internally, we were calling that a certain term, but I was just curious to see what users thought about third parties, like how if they were to look at a product card. So if you're on the website and you see a carousel of products, what if there was a tag in the corner there that was indicating this was sold by a third party? And if there was a tag there, what word or words would indicate to the user that this is a third party? So what I did was just come up with a list of like 15 to 20 names, and we mocked it up. We did a mock for each one where we had the tag on the product card. And then I think we just did one mock just to show the user where the tag would be. And then we did the survey that I was talking about before, where I would list the names and say, what do you think is most clear? And then I think the second question we asked was, what do you think is, which is most clearly would tell you like that this is sold by a third party without saying third party, I think. The second question was rank these in order from how I'm trying to think of how we worded this. Rank these in order of how you interpret them from like positive, most positive to least positive, or like positive to negative or something like that. But we basically let the users go in and rank them themselves. And then we had an input one, I think, to see if they had any other suggestions of what they would refer to it as. That is the only example that I can think of off the top of my head. I hope that's along the same lines as what you were asking about.
Yeah, thank you. This is helpful, as well as these suggestions in the chat. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everyone, by the way. Thank you.
Sarah, there was a question earlier in the chat around the literacy statistic you shared, and do you know any context behind that of how they were getting those statistics of like what reading level people are at?
I don't. It was from an NNG conference, creating engaging digital content, I believe is the name of it. And I took that course in October of 2019, and I don't remember. I don't like, I have gone back and looked at that slide deck again, and there was no further information. I didn't have anything in my notes. But I think the reason why the number is so large is because it says low or very low. So they're including two different fields there. Because I think when you look up literacy rates, I feel like the number that was coming up in most of my searches was like 20%, but it was only incorporating like illiteracy, for example, not like low and very low.
Yeah, I wanted to jump. I was the one that raised that issue. Hi. So I didn't mean to be. I didn't mean to be dismissive about that. It's just that with app use and the way that literacy might be conventionally assessed, I wonder what the relationship is. For example, over time, app use or just mobile technology use will increase literacy for many people who would normally not be classified as literate by conventional standards. So on the one hand, there's that, but then just these conventional literacy definitions, I wonder, maybe they might not necessarily be relevant. As you say, it's about a conversational interaction between the user and the interface. Conversation also doesn't require full literacy. So just, something that came to mind is that maybe it isn't necessarily the statistic you need to rely upon. But of course, it's always valid to bring that data in, just to think about how it's collected on a different type of orientation.
Well, that was a really interesting point that you brought up about how app usage can increase literacy. That's new to me, and that's fascinating. And
yeah, I mean, there are people who will say that they are illiterate, who would be deemed to be illiterate in many other contexts, and that they're completely communicatively competent. or that they say they don't speak English and that they can text with you in English all day. So that's just what comes to mind when you bring up those literacy statistics. Yeah.
Looks like Rachel posted a link. The stats she has seem to be in line with what you've seen in the past too, Sarah.
Okay.
Thanks, Rachel.
I mean, it seems like some of your earlier points though regarding just using simple language and direct language, I think is also applicable to people who might be highly illiterate in that, you know, when you're typically interacting with an app, sometimes even websites, you may just be in a hurry. You know, it can be really challenging, I think, to try to absorb a lot of complex language in that context.
Especially, and you have to think about what the user's trying to do also. Like, are you trying to transfer money on a banking app when your payment is overdue? Because that is stressful. Like, simple, clear, to the point language is what you would need in a scenario like that, just for an example off the top of my head. But I mean, context is everything. And again, like, I just never feel like it would do harm to be simple and clear and using plain language.
Looks like there's lots of interesting posts in the chat. Any other questions you'd like to raise for Sarah?
Can we access this chat log afterwards in case
I can download the file for you, and then if anybody's interested, feel free to ping me and I can share it out with you.
There's a new post, a question from Christopher. Do you have any book suggestions, Sarah, on how to get into UX writing? I know you had shared one of your favorites a little bit ago. Is there anything else?
I love this one. Writing is Designing is a great one. I also have Strategic Writing for UX. Tori Podmayarsky, she's amazing. I'm reading currently Writing for Designers. Let me make sure I'm getting the title right. Yeah. Writing for Designers by Scott Kuby. He is really great. I have a lot of books saved in a file that I have not purchased and read yet. But these have been instrumental to me at like various times, depending upon what I'm working on. Those have been so helpful. Yeah, those are probably like the most important, like these two specifically are probably the most important, the two books. I just have Writing for Designers as a PDF, but those two books are awesome.
And there's a new question. How do you organize or keep track of the iterations you go through for your UX copy?
Well, I'm a mess and it is something that I need to improve upon. Right now, the way that we work things is through InVision, and I have like a whole copy request process with different columns in terms of here's the request, I haven't touched it yet, I've touched it, it's back to you for review, it's final, we're done with it. That was really great at first when I started, but it's to the point now where it's become an unwieldy beast because there's no way to sort, there's no way to organize the past job. So I just have to like scroll through things. So it's something that I need to figure out a better system for, quite honestly. Because right now it's just not efficient when I'm doing. I don't want to recommend it to you. Be better than me. Oh, there's Writing for Designers by Dan Brown. I was talking about a different one. I'll have to look that up. Oh, Scott. Okay, there we go.
Great.
Writing this in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just saying thank you for writing those in the chat.
Awesome. So it looks like we're kind of winding down a bit. I did want to just mention that next month in February, we're not actually going to have our regular meetup. Instead, we're just going to kind of join forces with Mark, who spoke a little bit earlier about the World IA Day coming up. And so just really encourage everybody to attend that. I was there last year, Chris was there as well, and it was just such a great event. So we really want to draw as much attention to that as possible. And apart from that, just if anybody else has any final announcements or thoughts they want to share out. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining. And thank you again, Sarah, for your wonderful talk. And yeah, it was great to see so many people turn out. I think it's a record for us. So, so again,
thanks for having me.
Yeah. And we hope to see you all soon. Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone.